So it's just a new technique. Now, to me, it doesn't matter which way you solve quadratics. Maybe you're a factoring god or goddess and you want to always factor as much as possible. Do it. Okay? But maybe if factoring's not your cup of tea and you need a different way to solve a quadratic, consider completing the square because it works. And then for completing the square, we actually use this a lot when we study conics. And conics is actually going to show up second semester. So we will come back to some of this completing the square throughout the year. So again, it's one of those fun terms in math where you get to use it more than once. And so I'll be like, remember when we did complete the square? So then I'll be talking about this. So, all right, so these are the steps for completing the square. Okay, and so the first thing is you're going to check to see if the front and the back are perfect squares. And if they are, then I can go right to factoring, which is super cool. Okay, then we want to isolate the two terms, the ax squared and bx term. And part of me is thinking that this is a little bit, got a lot of lingo in here, that maybe I could simplify that out a little bit for you. If there's a number in the a position, we're going to factor that out if we need to. And then to complete the square, we're going to find half of b and square it. Then we're going to add the same thing to the other side of the equation. Then we're going to factor it. Then we're going to solve. Okay. I think we could probably simplify this a little bit. And so I might try to kind of give you a little bit better check sheet on that. Okay. So when we're looking for some of these things, first let's talk about how do you complete the square. So do you see how I have a C in for 1, 2, and 3? So what we're going to do is we're going to practice completing just the square term. So figuring out what the heck is C. So we're going to go baby steps. All right. And I don't know if you've done this in Algebra 1. You should have. But again, different teachers, different things happen. So when we're going to complete the square, see that lovely number there? That's in the B position. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that number that's in front of just the X and we're going to divide it by 2. Okay, so what is 40 divided by 2? So that's going to be 20, right? Now, to complete the square, so what we did is we took the middle term of 40, we divided it by 2. Now we got to square it. See, that's why it's called complete the square. So does anybody know what 20 squared would be? Because that's going to represent C. So that's 400. And so therefore I found C. Done. So first we're just talking about how to complete the square before we throw this into how do we use this to solve a quadratic. Okay, now the next two are a little bit ugly, and hopefully you can see why, because what did I do to the 40 to get 20? Why is this not going to be nice? It's, well, not that it's negative, because it's odd, so that's going to be kind of ucky, but we'll be okay. So same thing applies. We're going to take this middle term, and so we're going to have -9. Let's just leave it as -9 over 2, shall we? Because then that would just be easier. But you could call it -4.5 if you want. I mean, nothing wrong with that. So now we have to take that number and square it. Now, don't forget, what happens if I have a negative number and I'm going to square it? Yes, it is going to be positive. So does anybody know what -9 squared is? 81. Good. Does anybody know what 2 squared is? 4. There you go. So that would be C, 81/4. Again, if I wanted to go with decimals, because some of you guys feel more comfortable with decimals, the first number would have been -4.5, and then -4.5 would have been squared, would have been 20.25. So this is the same as 20.25. So I just squared 4.5 in my head. So that's how I can come up with the decimal. Okay, same thing with number 3. We're finding C. So what am I going to do to the 15? Last one like this. Divide it by 2. Okay, and so we have that. Then to get that C term, remember, we're going to square 15 over 2. Well, we know the bottom's going to have to be 4, right? Anybody know 15 squared? Dazzle me this wonderful Monday morning. 225, yeah. And so there's my C value. Or if you wanted, this could be 7.5. And then if you really care what the decimal is for this, it is going to be 56.25. You want to know how I can square that so fast? Yes, you do. Say yes. You don't want to learn how you can square things really fast in your head. Why not? It's cool though. Math tricks. Tricks are good for kids. Okay, think of this as 75, not 7.5. Okay, 75 is the middle between, in tens, what two numbers? So 70 and 80. Everybody with me so far? So right now I'm thinking of this as 75 instead of 7.5. The rule says when you square things that end in 5, you cut off the 0. And then do you know what 7 times 8 is? 56. And then 5 squared is always going to be 25. And then now why did I have to put that back in? And then why do I have to move it 2 places instead of 1? How many 7.5s are there? 2. So that's why I had to move it 2 spots. See, isn't that cool? How you can square in your head? Okay, you guys are not. You're smarter than a calculator. Okay, so here are kind of the terms, and I can kind of give you the list. You do not need to make sure it equals 0. So this is a strategy where it doesn't need to equal 0, okay? And so the first thing you would want to do is, do you see how there's no c term here? We just have x squared plus 6x. I'm going to leave a space because that's going to be our c. And then, of course, that's going to be 16. Okay, so that stuff is staying onto my left-hand side, and then we have the 16 over there. Okay, next thing we're going to do is let's complete the square. So anybody know what magic number is going to show up in that C position? So cut this in half, square it. And then Danielle, you said it earlier, it was 9. Now, if I add 9 to one side, what do you know about the rules of algebra? I have to add it to the other side. Everybody okay so far? So everybody okay where the 9 came from and why there's 2 9s? Because if I add 9 to one, got to add 9 to the other. Okay, so now I really have, in essence, x squared plus 6x plus 9 equals what? 16 and 9. 25. Okay, everybody okay so far? Okay, so first job, complete the square. Second, now we have to factor this. So let's play the number game. What two numbers multiply to 9 and add to 6? This is going to be really easy factoring. So what multiplies to 9 and adds to 6? 3 and 3. So x plus 3, x plus 3. It will always be either plus plus or minus minus depending on the first sign. If the first sign's a plus, it's plus plus. If the first sign's minus, then it's a minus minus. Okay, so I factored it. Now those two parentheses will always be the same. So I can write this shortcut as x plus 3 to what power? Squared. Okay, everybody okay so far? These parentheses, again, this is going to be what we call perfect trinomial, and it's always going to factor beautiful, just like that. And so then the last step is, how do you get rid of a square? So we're going to square root it. So then I'm going to have x plus 3 equals what? Plus or minus 5. And then that means I'm going to have two equations to solve. Either x plus 3 is going to equal 5, or x plus 3 is going to equal negative 5. So think about what would be the answer to the first equation. Minus 3 both sides. Boy, we're not thinking today. It's Monday. 2. And then the other one, you'd subtract 3 both sides and get negative 8. There is your first problem without doing a factoring, instead doing complete the square. Anybody remember this from algebra? No? This is fun stuff. So complete the square. So it's a different strategy. Some students like it, but again, it's going to show up again in conics. So that's an important part that we're going to go through. Okay, now, what happens if there's a number already in the C spot? Remember the C spot's right here, where the 24 is? So if there's a number already there, we need to decide if we're going to keep it or throw it. Okay, how do we know? Well, we're going to keep it if it's a perfect square. So remember, what kind of numbers are perfect squares? So like 1, 4, 9, 16, 25. Okay, is 24 a perfect square? So that means we got to say bye-bye. Where does he go? Yeah, other side. So what am I going to do to him? So I'm going to subtract him. So I'm going to leave a space for my new c, and over here is going to be negative 24. So if there's already a number that's like, you know, if there's already somewhere in that, somebody in that apartment, they're not supposed to be there, we got to kick them out. Okay, now we're back to where we were in the last problem. So what do I have to do to the 11? So we're going to divide it by 2. Now this is where I got to ask you guys questions. Do you want decimals or do you want fractions? What do you feel more comfortable with? Decimals? Either way? Okay. So, all right. So anyways, so if we have 11 over 2, the only thing is you'll have to do fractions over here. So that's why I'm thinking I might want to do a decimal with some of you guys, because I have a feeling some of you guys might feel more comfortable with that. So what is really 11 over 2? So that's going to be 5.5. Okay. Now, what am I going to do to 5.5 to make this new c value? Square it. And of course, again, because it ends in 5, that can get squared really easy. And so that's going to be 30.25. Again, the reason I did that, because it's 50 between 50 and 60. Cut off the zeros. What's 5 times 6? And then add the 2 5, and then I kind of had to move it 2 places in. So that's how I did it in my head. Okay, but I added 30.25. So what do we need to do? Add it to the other side. Okay, so we did that. Let me get rid of this because we don't need it anymore. And so now this is going to actually factor into a perfect square. So do I have to write 2 parentheses, or is it okay that you trust me and we just write 1? Yeah? Okay, so this is squared. So this is x. The first number will tell me if it's plus, plus, or minus, minus. So what is this? Plus. Okay, and then what number did we have again that made the 30.25? 5.5, that's this. And then we got to clean up this side. So we have to figure out what 30.25 minus 24 is. So 6.25. Everybody okay so far? I could have wrote x plus 5.5, x plus 5.5. I just shortened it up a step just by writing 5.5 quantity squared. Okay, then what do you think the next step is? Square root. So we're going to have 5, or probably x plus 5.5 equals plus or minus, I mean, know the square root of 6.25? What if it was 625? If it's 625, it would be 25. 2.5, yeah. Woohoo. And then solve it. So either x plus 5.5 is equal to 2.5, or x plus 5.5 is equal to negative 2.5. And so for this one, if I subtract 5.5, I should get negative 3, right? And then if we have that one, and I subtract negative 5.5 again, I should be getting negative 8. Correct? So what do you think? Complete the square. Yay, nay? Anybody like it better than factoring? No? Jury's still out? Or some of you guys still like factoring better? So it just kind of depends on what your train of thought is with that. So anyways, okay, so for 6 is kind of the same idea. I think we'll stop at 6 and then we'll come back and work on our notes. Does this have a c in it? No. So we're going to have 96, okay? And so from there, we have z squared plus 4z space equals 96. So what am I going to do to that 4z? So divide by 2, which is square it. So I'm going to add 4. But if I add 4 to one side, got to add 4 to the other side. Do you think people forget that step? Oh, yeah. So you got to be careful. Now, let's factor this baby because it's a perfect trinomial. That's why we call it complete the square, because you're making it a perfect trinomial. So we're going to get a z. Is this a plus or a minus in my parenthesis? Plus. Look at your first sign. It's a plus. And then what number did we square to get 4? 2. And then what is that going to equal? So that'd be 100, right? Okay, next step. Square root. So we're going to have z plus 2 equals plus or minus 10. And then we're going to have z plus 2 equals 10, or z plus 2 equals negative 10. And so for this one, we're going to subtract 2 and get 8. And then this one, we're going to subtract 2 and get negative 12. But notice all these problems, what number is in front of the z squared? A 1. And so that comes in actually pretty gosh darn handy with that. So anyways. So part of me wants to do 7 and then leave 8 alone for tomorrow and do that. So let's quickly go through 7, and then I'm going to modify your worksheet a little bit on how much I'm going to give you to do. Okay? So for number 7, okay, there's a C there. Do we keep them or throw them? Throw them. Why? Not a perfect square. So he's not a perfect square, so he cannot stay. He must vacate the premises, go to the other side. Okay, now what do I do to the negative 7? Divide by 2. Anybody know negative 7 divided by 2? Negative 3.5. Okay, good. Can we square that? Can I use the really cool Mrs. Capel trick? Come on. It's 30, 40, cough is 0. 12.25. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. So we got 12.25. But if I added 12.25 to one side, I have to add it to the other. Then from there, we're going to have parentheses t plus or minus. Minus, because the first sign's a minus. What number did I square to get 12.25? 3.5. And then that's quantity squared. And then I'm going to have to put together the negative 5.12.25, which is yucky. And that's 7.25. So this one's a little bit yucky pooey. So we're going to square root each side. And to be honest, since this doesn't come out nice, I think I'd leave him alone. Because otherwise, if you just square root them, what are you just getting? More decimals, right? Do we need more decimals? No. So then what I can do is then just add 3.5 both sides. And then I can just say, oh, this is 3.5 plus or minus the square root of 7.25. Because it's just going to be a decimal anyway, so why bother doing the square root? Because it's not a perfect square. So if it's not a perfect square, leave it alone. Didn't do anything to you. So, yay? So tomorrow we're going to talk about what if there's a number in front of your x squared, how do you do the complete the square? But you know what you'll learn later on? If there's a number in front of the x squared, you either A, try to factor it, or B, you do the quadratic formula. It's not the most fun to do complete the square. But I'll show you how, but it's not the most fun in the world.